Hello, welcome to This World. Vladimir Amelyan joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops.
We believe that world should be ruled by democracies.
I was interviewing you on television a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
And you said, if you really want to understand Jerusalem, why don't you come here and see it?
And you came.
Here I am. Mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. Why this cannot be fixed?
There are 425 million guns in the United States, which is more than the population.
The problem here is Trump has been able to make the argument that this is a political prosecution and that he's being singled out unfairly.
Defend our nation.
You are saying we could have a cure for cancer.
We'll have treatments for many cancers in this decade. And they're going to come from India.
Downside is that it could potentially wipe us out. But let's start with the upside. Hello and welcome to the year-end special edition of This World. My name is Vikram Chandra, and in this episode we are going to take a little break from tradition. And instead of bringing you a wrap of the week's biggest headlines, we are doing a quick recap of the year's highlights, the stories that made 2023. Some episodes, some interviews, some special coverage that really stood out for me, including some reports that went viral for reasons that we're not completely sure about. But so let's try and recap the year, the highlights of 2023 on This World. Now, it goes without saying that the biggest international story this year was what happened and what followed the October 7 attacks in Israel. And yes, I know there's also war that is taking place between Russia and Ukraine, but specifically what happened on October the 7th? Hamas launched a surprise attack. It raided border villages, opened fire at a music festival. Terrorists killed as many as 1,200 Israelis and kidnapped more than 240 people. Israel declared war, and the rest is history. Frankly, it also came as a shock for us, because at the start of the year, in the month of February and March, This World was actually in Israel. We were covering the judicial reform protests out there. We were talking about Israel's startup culture. We were talking about how generations of people have coexisted in cities like Jerusalem. Yes, there was tension. Yes, there was strife. But we did do a special tour of the old city of Jerusalem with the city's Deputy Mayor, Fleur Hassan Nahum. And now, as we see devastation and death and havoc and all that is unfolding in Israel, I can't help but looking at that footage again and again. I can't help but remembering what I actually saw in Jerusalem just a few months ago. So first of all, I have to say, so this is the Jaffa Gate, right?
Jaffa Gate, 16th century Ottoman gate. And the reason it's L-shaped was to another kind of defense to the old city. And this gap is also part of Jaffa Gate. Today, it's one of the main tourist entrances to the old city.
Well, I have to say, I have to say thank you so much for doing this. Not everybody, I'm sure, who gets a deputy mayor of Jerusalem to actually give you a walking tour through the old city.
Well, first of all, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. But I want to come back to what I was saying to you when I was talking to you in an interview. And I did look at what about safety and what about security. And I have to say I'm quite...
Do you feel unsafe?
No, but I'm also feeling... I'm certainly not feeling unsafe, but I'm almost surprised that you as a deputy mayor are walking around here. There's no security guard anywhere to be seen.
No.
I haven't actually going in and out of the hotels had any metal detectors.
No.
No one's really checked me.
Well,
why is that so? Because Israel had a reputation for really, really, really tight security. And I have to say it's probably a lot less than Delhi right now.
Really?
Delhi hasn't had a terror attack in.
So I would say that the security here is, you don't see it, but it's around. Basically, the whole city is a network of cameras. So there is some place in City Hall where everybody's seeing what we're doing right now. They're not paying much attention because we're not doing anything suspicious. But there are eyes Everywhere, we are one of the
so
most...
you're saying it's not in your... that's where the Israeli technology really comes in, right?
Exactly. But you will see soldiers and policemen further down in the market to ensure that everything is peaceful.
So there's no visible security at this present moment. I'm just trying to understand this again, because I think that's an interesting lesson for us to...
Yes, there's no visible security, but there are cameras everywhere.
And that means in many ways it's actually strange, because having cameras everywhere should feel very intrusive. But
Not
in
at
many
all.
ways it's less than having security forces everywhere.
Absolutely, but you have some security guys over there, police.
Okay.
And so there is presence for people to feel safe and to be safe. But normally these vendors just want people to buy. This is a tourism destination. This is the most visited tourist site in Israel.
Okay.
And the vendors want people to buy.
Okay.
By the way, I want to say one thing, which is very, very... When there were no tourists, we took advantage and we put in place an accessibility plan. We are the most accessible ancient... We're the most accessible ancient city in the world. All of this means that a person in a wheelchair can come and visit the old city, can go and visit the church, can go and visit the mosque.
Excuse me, come see my shop, what you have.
How are you?
It's a lovely place to come and shop.
It is. We'll shop. So this is accessibility. That's what it is.
Of course, the real havoc and the real devastation is taking place in Gaza right now. But even this December, after terror struck, after the reaction, the response of what we've seen, on Christmas, the streets of Bethlehem and Old Jerusalem were empty once again. And that contrast is something that just continues to stick in my mind. Let's just play a little bit more of that particular conversation. All right, so let's move now from security to the politics of this, right?
Yes.
Of what exactly is happening. It's, for anybody looking at it from the outside, it seems that the positions that have been taken are continuing to be intractable. There's no easy solution in mind. Israel had a lot of sympathy from the entire world as to what was done originally, like the way Israelis fought in the 1948 war, in 1967, beat all those neighbors, set up a fantastic, successful, technologically heavy country in the middle of the desert. All of that is the stuff of legend right now. But that David and Goliath story has been somewhat turned on its head in recent times.
Yes.
You're hearing about boycott movements and BDS and what have you, and Israel being very clearly positioned as the international bad guy in all of this.
Yeah.
How would you react to all that?
I think it's extremely unfair. And I think that what people don't seem to understand is that the conflict in this country is not about the fact that there's no Palestinian state. The conflict in this country is about the fact that there's a Jewish state. Ideologically, the Palestinian leadership has never accepted our existence. How do I know that? They've been offered 4 times everything they said they wanted and still rejected those peace deals. And what did they return with? Violence and terrorism. So if you want a state, why don't you have a state already? They've had plenty of opportunities. And that's why the real reason that we're still in this situation is because the Palestinian leadership is lying to their people, telling them one day we're going to kick them all out. One day the whole thing is going to be back. They do not talk to them about a peaceful resolution.
I'm sorry, I got distracted by the...
By the historical crossroads in here.
So if I just look at that, and let's just talk that through for a moment, what that one sign means. Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is that way. That's where Christ was crucified. A Western Wall, one of the most sacred spots for the Jews for thousands of years. And Temple Mount, Al-Haram Sharif, where the Prophet Muhammad was
But what this poster is telling you something else, and that is that we sanctify freedom of worship in the city, mainly because it's under Israeli sovereignty. Before Israel took sovereignty, there was no way that you and I could have gone to the church or even the Western Wall.
Well, that was in February, and I guess there was no way for either Fleur or I to foresee the future or have any idea of how ironical and in some ways perhaps even prophetic that conversation will become just a few months later. Well, the war has changed the course of history in West Asia and beyond. And speaking of that, this is also the year where India made history by becoming the first country to land on the south side of the moon. Chandrayaan-3 was one of the biggest stories coming out of India in 2023, which the rest of the world was taking a close look at. Also, one of the biggest achievements of the year. Wasn't an easy feat. The south pole of the moon has rugged terrain and there are craters and deep trenches. Temperatures are extremely low. We're talking about minus 230 degrees Celsius. A soft landing or a gentle landing on the south side of the moon is extremely difficult. Russia's Luna 25 tried to soft land just days before Chandrayaan tried it, but it crashed into the moon's surface. And on the 23rd of August, Chandrayaan-3 made the impossible possible. With its landing, India also became only the fourth country to land on the moon after the Soviet Union, the United States and China. Now, while the world was applauding the Indian Space Research Organization, there were a few jealous Brits who thought they could politicize India's achievements. Now, this particular episode stood out for me because I'm not normally the sort of a person to lose his cool on air. But when covering this particular story, well, a few red buttons were pressed, and that led to this particular rant by me, which, yes, it did go viral on social media.
I would like to congratulate India on landing on the dark side of the moon. I would also like to now invite India to return the £2.3 billion foreign aid money that we sent them between 2016 and 2021. We're also set to give them £57 million next year. But I think the British taxpayer should keep hold of that, don't you? We should not be giving money to countries with a space programme. As a rule, if you can afford to fire a rocket at the dark side of the moon, you shouldn't be coming to us with your hand out.
So many things wrong and on so many different levels. I hate to do this, but I feel we must correct this man. Let's just go one point at a time. First, the aid. What exactly is he talking about? According to all the statistics that we have been able to dredge up, and we've been looking, between 2016 and 2021, the UK did give India a small amount of money in bilateral aid, but also some money in development assistance, which was via, for example, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and then a certain amount of money through multilateral organizations. Well, let's park those. Those are multilateral organizations, and that's our investment money. And then a certain amount was invested. I'm using the word very carefully. Invested through the BIL, the government-owned British International Investment. Now, this was a slightly larger sum of money. But here's the point. This was an investment, not aid. Just look at some examples of where this money went into. Mid-sized banks, coffee chains, media companies, companies manufacturing dinnerware and serveware. Let me read out for you what the ICAI pointed out in 2023. It said, and I quote, "While the aid portfolio may be helping to support UK-India bilateral relations, it lacks a strong link to poverty reduction, which remain the statutory purpose of UK aid." So in short, this is not aid for poverty reduction. This is not charity to some poor, struggling third world country. These are investments. Overwhelmingly, these are investments. Investments aimed at riding India's soaring economy. So if it pleases you, Mr. Patrick Christie's, take the investment away. Don't invest in India. It may find better avenues for good, positive returns in the UK, but whatever the growth rate is there, with joblessness and the questions around the economy, maybe that money will get a better investment return there. Maybe not, but in any case, it is certainly not aid or charity. Also, let me remind you of some facts. The so-called aid was never given to the government of India because India has not asked for this money. India has had a policy for some time not to take foreign aid. The money went to companies and to NGOs that the UK had handpicked as per its convenience, as per its desire, and as per the requirement of the investment portfolio. I'm not saying this. UK's own Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, or the FCDO, says as much. In 2022, the FCDO spokesperson said, and I quote, "Since 2015, the UK has given no financial aid to the government of India. Most of our funding now is focused on business investment, which help create new markets and jobs for the UK." I could read that out for you again, but I won't. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. Now, that's reality for you, and that's what's happening today. Time for some history now. Referring to that British aid, now back in 2011, the then Finance Minister, Pranab Mukherjee, had said, and I quote, "We do not require the aid. It is a peanut in our total development exercise." In short, India does not need the UK's aid. It has not needed it for a while now, and it is not asking for any aid. So if anyone is wanting to give aid, I think it's really important that the government of India should once again repeat what has been said many times in the past. Thank you very much. Actually, India is not really looking for aid. India is actually providing aid to many other countries. We'll come to that in the past. There is no denying that in the past, the UK did provide bilateral aid to India, and it was very welcome at that time, shortly after independence. But that past is long gone. Today, the UK is contributing money into India for its own interests and to uphold its own commitment to international funds. That is fine. It is also worth noting, without being ungracious in any manner, that the amount of money that is being spoken about here is a pittance compared to the size of India and a pittance compared to what India itself donates to other countries. India, for example, contributes billions of dollars in assistance, in loans, in lives, in grants to countries like Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, you name it. So that's what the reality of the situation today is. Let me now turn to the part about repayment, because I've been seeing many of these tweets about how India should repay the money that Britain has given it. India needs to repay its debt. We gave all this money to India. India should repay money. I'm normally a very mild person, but repayment is a word that the UK is better off not using, not when it comes to India. I'll tell you why. Because any conversation on repayment opens a can of worms. It is the United Kingdom and the British Crown that has a lot of repayment to catch up on when it comes to India. Let's face it. Just because we don't talk about it too much, let's face it. Britain looted India for nearly 200 years. First, the British East India Company squeezed India of its riches. Then came the British Crown. The UK needs to repay India for 2 centuries worth of humiliations, 2 centuries worth of repression, and 2 centuries worth of loot in many ways. Well, looking at the reaction that that particular rant got, perhaps I should try and do a little bit more of it on TV once in a while. But if you were to ask me, death, devastation, war, havoc, all of those things aside, 2023 will really be remembered as the year of AI, artificial intelligence, which previously seemed like a somewhat distant reality, but 2023 was the year when it really became mainstream. We spoke to Nick Bostrom, who predicted more than a decade ago that AI will be impossible to contain, and therefore it could carry with it the seeds of superintelligence and possible human extinction. We also spoke to somebody like Pedro Domingos, whose seminal work on artificial intelligence actually found a place in Chinese President Xi Jinping's bookshelf. We spoke to them and many other top experts about what AI actually means for all of us.
And it's a technical problem, ultimately, how to develop methods, algorithms, training methods that would make sure that you align, that its goals are actually what we have in mind. Then I think there are 2 other big areas of challenge that we also will need to manage. So there is what you might call the governance challenge or the political challenge, like assuming we solve the technical alignment problem. Then how do we make sure that by and large, at least, we humans then use these AI systems for positive purposes rather than, waging war against one another or oppressing one another and so forth?
First of all, it's important to realize that we're still very far from that. We've come 1,000 miles, but there's 1,000,000 miles more to go. We are still, even with things like ChatGPT, only scratching the surface of what intelligent is. So we're very far from that. But moreover, if you imagine a future, who knows how far away from now, 100 years, 50, 1,000, who knows, where AI can do everything that humans can. That does not mean that the AIs take over. We can have AIs that are extremely powerful and we still control them.
And that leads me to one of my favorite interviews of the year because, hey, if 2023 was so much about AI, there was also a certain amount of conversation about other things like aliens and extraterrestrials and UFOs and what is the path that science is going to take in the next 5 years or 10 years. And who better to speak to about all of that than Neil deGrasse Tyson, yes, the American astrophysicist, who's probably more responsible than anybody else to make science and technology and exponential technology a household name. I spoke to him just after he met the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was on his state visit to the United States. So I did catch up with Neil deGrasse Tyson and I asked him about his predictions for which way the world of technology was heading.
I think in a very short time, self-driving electric cars will completely replace all other cars on the road. Self-driving cars can drive twice as fast as you can. They have instant reflexes, which you don't. And if you want to change lanes, you tell the other cars, I want to change lanes. They will part for you. You change lanes. This is self-driving electric cars. That is the future. It'll save millions of lives. Okay, we lose 40,000 people a year on our highways in the cars and getting hit by cars just from car accidents. We can basically take that to near zero in self-driving cars. So I see that, maybe even within 10 years. I see the human genome we're so good at it that we isolate certain devastating congenital diseases so we can cure certain diseases that are scorers to humanity. And I can see that as the first of this. And then maybe medicines, drugs and this is a special interest to the pharmaceutical industry of India, drugs that are so perfectly tuned to your DNA that there are no side effects at all.
And before I go, let me play out for you this year's most popular This World story, a story that has been viewed nearly 4 million times on YouTube alone. This is a story about a strange leak at the bottom of the Pacific. There is a hole at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and this hole is leaking water upwards. Not ocean water, but warm water, at least 9 degrees warmer compared to the ocean water. How did researchers find this tiny hole in the vast floor of one of the world's biggest oceans? Well, its signs were first picked up by a ship's sonar, which found unexpected bubbles beneath the ocean's surface. Initially, they believed this to be methane bubbles. But upon observation, researchers realized what was leaking wasn't methane or warm water, but tectonic lubricant. And it was coming from the Cascadia mega thrust. What's that, you ask? Well, it's a boundary between two of the Earth's tectonic plates, the Juan de Fuca tectonic plate and the North American tectonic plate. It just happens that the hole lies in the Cascada subduction zone. I'm getting a little technical out here, but that's a fault line between Northern California and the Vancouver Island. Where exactly is it located? Just 80 kilometers off the Oregon coast. It's not that far from the coast of America, not that far from Canada either. It's the first known leak of its kind. Scientists have not ruled out the possibility of more such leaks nearby. But here's what's scary, and this is why we have to monitor this really closely, is the thought of what happens next. Scientists explain that the loss of fluid could lower the fluid pressure between the two tectonic plates, and this could cause friction and stress, and that could result in a massive earthquake. A 9 magnitude earthquake is what some people have said is possible. Now that's a quake so strong that, entire communities near that entire epicenter could be destroyed. This is a Pacific Ocean, so you could have a tsunami. It could trigger a massive tsunami and affect the entire coastal areas, countries on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, could be seriously affected by this. So that was our year-end show. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did putting it together. My name is Vikram Chandra, and that's it for now. On behalf of the entire team, I would like to wish you all a very happy New Year.